I never thought a weekend could change everything about my life. My name is David, and I've been married to Sarah for nearly 8 years. On the surface, we were happy. A comfortable home, a loving daughter, Madison, and routines that seemed peaceful. But beneath that calm, I had begun noticing small cracks. Sarah had become secretive, distant, and unusually protective of her phone. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that people needed personal space. But intuition, that quiet voice in the back of my mind, whispered that something was wrong. It all came to a head when Sarah announced a 3-day girls' trip to a spa resort out of town. She spoke cheerfully, oblivious to the knot forming in my stomach. I asked a few normal questions: the hotel name, the schedule, and who she'd be traveling with. She laughed lightly, brushing me off. "It's just a girls' weekend, David. Don't worry about me. Relax." I wanted to believe her, really I did, but there was something in her tone, a practiced nonchalance, that made me uneasy. While she was away, I kept myself busy, but the feeling wouldn't leave me. Then came the messages, one from a mutual friend, subtle but revealing. I didn't act immediately. Instead, I checked the home computer later that evening, hoping I was wrong, praying I'd find nothing. But what I found made my blood run cold. Emails, photos, and chat logs detailed encounters Sarah had been having with a man I didn't know. Someone she had met only recently, yet had already invited into moments that should have been private between us. Shock and disbelief collided inside me. I reread the messages, each more damning than the last. There were plans to meet while she was out with the girls, explicit conversations, and even excuses she had prepared for me in case I asked. This wasn't a casual flirtation. It was a deliberate affair, meticulously hidden. And worse, she had returned home without a hint of guilt, as if nothing had happened. I felt a strange mix of rage, despair, and cold clarity. My marriage, the home I had built, the daughter we shared. All of it was now tainted by deceit. I wanted to confront her, scream, demand answers, but I knew that wouldn't solve the deeper problem. This betrayal was bigger than a fight. It was about health, honesty, and the life we had promised to protect. And as the hours passed, that quiet voice in me realized the unthinkable. There were consequences far more serious than heartbreak waiting for us. The nightmare became real the next morning. Sarah called me from the hospital, her voice shaky, almost unrecognizable. She had gone in for a routine checkup after feeling unwell, only to discover she had contracted an STD. The doctor's words were clinical, detached, but to me they rang like an alarm. The trust one had placed in her had not only been shattered emotionally, but now physically as well. My mind raced. How could she be so careless? How could she put herself and indirectly our daughter at risk? When I arrived at the hospital, I found Sarah sitting on the examination bed, pale and frightened. Her hands trembled as she held Madison's favorite stuffed animal, clutching it as though it could shield her from the consequences of her actions. The tension in the room was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand explanations, but my voice caught in my throat. I realized that my anger had to be measured. This was not just about betrayal. It was about dealing with a situation that had life-altering consequences. Madison entered the room shortly after, her small face creased in confusion. She had overheard fragments of conversations, and her innocence made her both vulnerable and painfully perceptive. "Daddy, did Mommy hurt herself?" she asked, her voice trembling. My heart broke in two. I knelt in front of her, trying to find the right words to explain something. I wasn't even sure how to explain myself. "It's complicated, sweetie," I said gently. "Sometimes people make mistakes, and we have to deal with the consequences." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was a sharpness there, a sense of judgment I hadn't expected from a 7-year-old. Madison blamed me in part for trusting Sarah, for thinking everything was fine, for allowing her to go on that trip unsupervised. The weight of her disappointment pressed down on me more heavily than any anger at Sarah ever could. Sarah's parents were called, and the room filled with the stunned silence of adults trying to process the unimaginable. Their questions were careful, measured, but full of hurt. And through it all, I realized that my life, our family, and the stability we had known had been irrevocably altered. The affair, the STD, the daughter's confusion, all of it was a chain reaction that started with a seemingly innocent weekend trip. I looked at Sarah, her head bowed in shame, and felt a mixture of sorrow and resolve. Her choices had consequences, and those consequences could not be ignored. By the time we left the hospital, I knew that my life had entered a new phase. Trust had been broken beyond repair. The emotional betrayal had led to physical consequences, and the innocent had been caught in the crossfire. I felt the weight of responsibility not only to myself, but to Madison, to protect her, guide her, and teach her the painful truths about human behavior, choices, and consequences. I could no longer be passive. This was a turning point. The days that followed were a blur of hospital visits, uncomfortable conversations, and silent, searing anger. I had to step into a role I never imagined, part protector, part disciplinarian, part parent trying to shield a child from the fallout of adult mistakes. Sarah was fragile, ashamed, and dependent on me in a way that made my heart ache, but I knew that sympathy could not excuse her betrayal. The affair had consequences that extended beyond our marriage. It had touched our daughter's life, her health, and her sense of security. Madison's questions became harder to answer with each passing day. "Why did Mommy do this?" she asked one evening, tears pooling in her eyes. I wanted to shield her from the full truth, but she was perceptive, intelligent, and deserving of honesty, even if it was painful. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt themselves and the people around them, I explained gently. It's not your fault, and it's not because you did anything wrong. People just make mistakes. I held her close, feeling the fragile trust between us quivering like a thread in the wind. I knew that repairing our bond would take time, patience, and unwavering honesty. Meanwhile, Sarah withdrew into herself, consumed by guilt and fear. The hospital visits and treatment were reminders of the choices she had made. And I realized that there was no turning back to the life we had before. Our marriage, already fragile in some unspoken ways, was now irreparably fractured. Each moment of intimacy, each conversation was overshadowed by betrayal and the knowledge that trust, once lost, cannot simply be rebuilt. And yet, despite everything, I remained rational, steady, knowing that anger alone would not protect my daughter or myself. I made the decision to take control of the narrative. I distanced myself from Sarah, setting firm boundaries, and focused on Madison's emotional and physical safety. I contacted the school, doctors, and counselors where necessary, ensuring that our daughter would feel secure despite the chaos her mother's choices had unleashed. It was painful, exhausting, and lonely, but it was necessary. Sarah's betrayal had not only cost me my peace of mind, it had endangered the one person I was responsible for protecting above all else. In the weeks that followed, I began to understand the true weight of betrayal. It is not just a personal violation. It is a ripple that touches everyone connected to the betrayer. The woman I had loved, the mother of my child, had crossed a line that could never be undone. I could no longer rely on the illusion of a perfect family. I had to rebuild my life, safeguard my daughter, and accept that sometimes, love and loyalty are not enough to protect against human recklessness. And in that acceptance I found a strange clarity, a resolve to move forward, to safeguard what truly matters, and to ensure that the consequences of deceit were never ignored again.